My name is Jeffrey Chernick. I am the Chief Strategy Officer of MedResults. We are a medical device company and innovator in the field for over 20 years. Um, I got involved personally with MedResults because I fell in love with the founder, Arash. You usually see him on these webinars. He is a amazing innovator in the space. Myself, I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've started three companies. I've built venture-backed companies in the mobility space and mobile consumer apps. And the medical device space has always fascinated me because I really want to help people. And when I met Arash and learned about what we're doing, I just wanted to be a part of it and got involved as a running strategy here. As a company, we've got nine brands under our umbrella, but the one you might know most is the Plexr, which is an incredible device that we're going to be talking to about today. And on that note, I want to introduce our beloved speaker. You know him well, Chris Croley, MD. He's going to do his own introduction because there's too much for me to say, but I will say it involves Skin and Tonic, which is an amazing brand. But Chris, please, I hand it over to you. I'd love to learn a little bit more about who you are.
We're going to go over some things. It's an exciting topic. And so we're going to be talking about our cat scratching technique. And before we jump into that, I want to tell for all the new people that I don't know a little bit about me. And so I'm Dr. Chris Croley. I'm the founder of Skin and Tonic, which is one of the premier med spas located just outside of Pensacola, Florida. So we're right there on the Gulf Coast in the panhandle of Florida. And my husband and I have had that practice now. We've had our practice for around 16 years. We rebranded from JDCC to Skin and Tonic about 5 years ago. And we've grown that location. We have a couple of other satellite offices in Alabama. We're the host of a weekly podcast, Beauty and the Brain, where we talk about all things aesthetics. It's kind of targeted for our patients and for you providers out there to see kind of new and trendy things in the aesthetic medicine space. So go and check that out. My Instagram is just Dr. Croley, and in that you can go and find links to where you can, see what we're doing in the practice and listen to some of the podcasts and all the great things that I'm doing with our Plexr devices. So, when we started this aesthetic space, really we viewed this as more of a vacation fund or side business. And never did I envision that we'd be able to grow a practice that would replace my anesthesia critical care salary. And so we weren't real purposeful with this in the beginning. We were just doing some injections on the side, doing some Botox parties. And it was a lot of fun. We enjoyed it. But as the years went on, we saw potential and we're like, are we really doing what we need to do to focus on our business and focus on the growth of this business? And what else should we be offering? How should we be analyzing these things? So as you know, over the past several years, I've really taken an interest in the business side of things and in helping educate our new people into this space on how to run a business efficiently and really how some of these energy-based devices can change the profitability of their practice. So we can go from some of these smaller margins that we get with our injectables to really getting not only great results for our patients. So we're using therapies that are now, the energy-based devices we have now and some of the treatment protocols are safer than we've ever had. So they're definitely different than when I entered this space and purchased our first device 13 years ago. So we're getting phenomenal results, and we're seeing that this is changing the profitability and success of practices. So I'm passionate about sharing what we've learned the hard way over the years and helping new providers really succeed with their practice. So I've been now working with Plexr for around a year or so. I really think plasma energy in general is the way of the future. And so I've been working with this type of energy device. I have a lot of lasers in my practice. I have, the traditional CO2, Nd:YAG, erbium. But I've been working with plasma energy now for several years before I even started working with the Plexr. And actually, I was introduced to it before I even met Arash by the plasmatology group up in Canada. And I was doing a webinar with them and they said, hey, we have this product as well as the other one that you're talking about, and let's have a little discussion about it. And as I was educated on the device, I became curious. It just happened by sheer happenstance that I was in New York teaching an Empire class and I met Arash about 2 weeks later.
Oh,
And I was like,
wow.
wait a minute, this is the device
Yeah.
that I just heard about from
Yeah.
a company in Canada.
Divine intervention. Yeah.
Yeah, divine intervention. And he wanted to do a treatment on me, and I'm like, absolutely not. And any of you guys that have been in classes with me know that I'm not real open to getting treatments, especially at seminars. I'm a baby. I don't want students seeing me acting crazy. I don't want to look red and
Uh,
inflamed the weekend. So in general, I'm not getting procedures. Um, for whatever reason, I did trust Arash, and I was like, I guess I'll let you do it. And we did a Plexr shower, and he used one of the other products that we have in the Med Results line, so Active Feel. And my skin looked great that weekend. And this was like, maybe on Thursday, and by Saturday, I was just glowing. It looked great. And I let him try it again. And so early on, before I started using the Plexr, I brought in the Active Feel line of products, and I started doing it with microneedling, some other things in our
mm,
practice. And our patients started noticing, the difference. But then getting back to what I'm passionate about, education in general is a big umbrella. But then as we kind of boil that down, I go through different phases of kind of what's piquing my interest in. And the business and success of new providers is really something that I get a lot of pleasure out of helping people and watching them succeed. And so when we started looking at the Plexer, I was like, I'm giving all this advice, but I'm not really following it myself. Like this is
mm,
a great investment, and there's a lot of potential for me to have phenomenal results and generate a lot of profit with this device for my practice. And so with further talks with Arash, we did bring the Plexer on and started doing it. And then, over the time that I've been using that, before we even bought it, actually, I think I tried some out for a little while. We started seeing these really amazing results with minimal downtime. And so that brings me to what we're going to talk about tonight. We're going to go over just really one small segment or one little protocol that we do with this device. So we have a lot of things that we can do with the device, some a little less aggressive, some a little more aggressive. But one of the things that we've really just seen phenomenal results with is this cat scratching technique. And we're going to go into the technique, how it works, how we price that, the different areas of the body that we can use it on, and hopefully answer any questions that you guys have. So one of the ways that you're going to learn most and that you're going to find out about this device and others is to ask questions. And so I do have a presentation. I'm going to share my slides here in a couple of minutes. We're going to go through that, but also at the end, we're going to take questions from all of you. And so if you have questions that come up throughout the presentation, go ahead and type them in the Q&A box, because that's the way we'll see them, we'll answer them, and those will be recorded. So when we send out this webinar in the future, you get an email recording of this to reference back to. We want you to have access to the questions. So if you'll put them in that Q&A box, it'll stay part of the presentation. It helps us and it'll help you guys in the future. And again, Jeffrey knows I'll stay here as long as it takes.
as
And so
long as
there's
it takes. Yeah,
as long as it
dedicated.
takes, we will get all the questions answered. So don't feel shy, put them in there. We want you all to get, as much as you can out of this. Kim, if you have anything to add, feel free to chime in, at least put it in the chat box so we can see it. Love to hear your input as well. And obviously, Jeffrey, you're going to be here right alongside me all night, so you can chime in as
Yeah, you
well.
got it. And again, we send out the recording to everyone who's registered. So if you miss something, don't worry, you'll get it. And if we miss a question, we will answer it. We will respond to you even after this webinar. So yeah, I'm excited to hear. Really appreciate Dr. Crowley, you being here today and sharing your grace and your, I really do enjoy whether it's about Plex or really anything you're teaching. You're a great teacher. I like hearing you and your wisdom just around this general aesthetic space. So I thank you so much for being here. And on that note, let's get into presentation time.
Let's get into it. Okay,
Do it.
I'm gonna share my screen now. Hopefully I can make this part work. Arash usually does that for me. So, all right.
Gotta find the presentation button.
This, and now we're gonna view.
Anyone who's ever done a presentation on Zoom can appreciate this moment.
This is like, is it gonna work? Present full
Here you go.
screen.
Boom.
There we go. Got it.
Got it. Looks great.
Now, are you guys seeing my video there? Or you can see
Yeah.
the whole slide.
We see your video in the corner and we got the full slide.
Okay. Do you know how I can like minimize that? I don't know what you got there. That's what I want.
Oh,
I want you to
no,
see
yeah,
that.
it looks great. It's full
Okay,
screen.
perfect. All right. I think I've told you guys most of this already, but feel free to reference back to it. We touched briefly on your ROI on this, and this is something that you're going to hear me talk about throughout the evening, is your ROI or your return on your investment. And so this is something that really, as providers, that you need to understand, whether you're a business owner or a practice owner, or whether you're just a provider within the practice, for us all to do well and for you to, continue enjoying employment and potential bonuses, then we need to understand this principle and how it works. And as we go through this presentation tonight, I'm going to explain to you how the use of this device and this particular procedure, this cat scratching technique, can help you have exceptional ROI or return on investment in your practice. So really with this Plexr, it's a unique device. So it's something that is a plasma energy device that we are using this handheld device. So there's three hand pieces you see here. There's a low, a medium, and a high energy hand piece. And we'll show you a picture of the whole system in a couple of slides. But each of these can work independently. And so you can have, kind of three providers working simultaneously using all the different hand pieces in your office at the same time. But with this technology, I think it's often confused with the plasma pen. And so I like to address that elephant in the room right up front. I like to talk about it right from the beginning. So if there's any questions about that, you guys can kind of mull it over in your head. You can put them in the Q&A box and we can address that before we get off of this webinar tonight. So with the plasma pens, so that is a general term that I find is used for a number of devices. And so, especially in Florida, for instance, around my area, there was a big, kind of uptake in people using these devices, but they were ordering them from non-medical companies. They were not medical providers. And some of these were nothing more than an electrocautery device. So we were using electrical energy to create some sort of burn or char on the skin, which was leading to a lot of side effects. So one of my big hesitancies with bringing this into the practice, and even when I first heard about this through the webinar I was doing with the Canadian company, was the burns that I had seen from plasma type pens. And I will be honest, I didn't understand differences in the technology at that point in time. And so to me, I had seen people in my practice that had dark spots, chars, scarring, that were coming to us for treatment. And we were doing a number of other modalities to try to treat those complications. And so until I really started researching this particular technology more and understanding the advancements that the main company out of Rome has put into producing these devices, it was hard for me to differentiate this between what looked very similar. So the pattern of energy delivery looked similar. The sparks created looked similar. But in reality, the technology is very advanced. And so it looks simple. It is simple, but it is an advanced technology that allows us to perform a number of treatments safely and effectively on all skin types. So there's some safety measures that are built in. So we have auto shoot, auto stop. We can do an ultra focused plasma beam, or we can actually do that spread out. And so you'll see, if you look at those three devices and you notice a difference in the colors of the power buttons, green, red, and white, that's signifies the type of energy that that particular handpiece delivers. But also I want you to look a little bit closer at the tips that you see on these devices. And you see one is kind of like a triangle shape, and that's our shower tip, and that spreads that energy out across that entire tip. The other one is a focused, it looks kind of like a pencil tip, and you'll see that that's a long one that's in the middle on the white hand piece. And then you see there's a very thin one on the red one, and that's an ultra focused, or it really, and so this energy, we're spreading it out wide over that triangle tip. We're focusing it down to something like a pencil tip, or down all the way to something like a small needle tip. The smaller those tips are, the more energy that we can deliver like through that focused area. And so that's how we move from the triangle being our nano ablative, or we can touch this to the skin, really kind of skip along the top of the skin. That's what we're going to talk about tonight with our cat scratching technique. And so for those, we're using either the, kind of focus or ultra focus plasma beam on those two needle-like tips. And so as we talk about the technique tonight, I want you to understand that for the technique we're going to discuss, we're going to need these tips that are not spreading the energy out widely like that shower tip on there. There's minimal or to no thermal damage. And so because of that, we can do these treatments relatively, close together if we need to. because of the no thermal damage, we're going to minimize the chance. It's really, I've not had any patients in my practice to this point in time that has any kind of long-term problems with hyper or hypopigmentation, which many of you know is one of the main complications from using energy-based devices that will create heat. We don't have scarring with this, and for some of the procedures, there's no injectable numbing that's required. Actually, for all the procedures, we can do without injectable numbing. We can do it with just topical numbing. For some of the more ablative therapies, not the cat scratching technique, we may do some injectable numbing around that area. So GMV is the company that manufactures the Plexr device. This is an example of the device. It's on a cart. So the device itself is not that large, but this is on a cart. There's over 100 indications that we could use this device for. The FDA clearance is for destruction and removal of tissue. And so, with that in consideration, we can use it for a lot of different indications. We can use it throughout the body. And so when we think about the anatomical possibilities, so we can use this directly on the eyelids without intraocular shields. We can use it in the scalp. We can use it throughout the face and body. And we can even use it, there's an intravaginal tip. So we can even use this for some of our sexual health indications. There's new indications coming out. There's new procedures. That's the exciting thing. There's a lot of celebrity physicians that are using this. And so, Arash, has talked a lot about Dr. Tess, who does Paul Abdul's Rockstar treatment and does that before big events. And we have Dr. Sheila Nazarian, who does a lot of these treatments. And so, hopefully one day with one of these events, I'll get to meet both of those. They're people I would love to kind of get to meet and interact with, but they do these treatments and they're having great results with their celebrity clients. And with the skin color, we can treat all skin types with this device. So here's an example of what the Plexr workstation looks like. So you see it as a small tabletop device with 3 hand pieces on it. Those hand pieces are programmed through the device, and the device is programmed through Wi-Fi. So you can get easy updates over the air through your Wi-Fi. We put it in the actual base station, and we can program whether it's going to be, auto on or off, or continuous or fractional. And once we do that, it sends the signal into the handpiece. And from that point forward, the handpiece will work independently of the base station. And so I can take that device anywhere in my practice and use it. And actually, I can take it away from the practice. And so almost always when I travel, I'll put one of the handpieces in my bag. And so, I'm doing one of the less aggressive treatments on myself before big events, or if I'm going to a remote office, or my mom says, hey, bring it to dinner, I want you to do a treatment on me. These are very portable and easily taken with you to a variety of places. For the more ablative treatments, we do recommend a smoke evacuator, which is what you see on the right side of that screen. So because results matter, that's what patients are, asking for. They're not usually coming in because they care about you doing a particular procedure. They're coming in because of a problem that they've identified, and you're giving them a solution to that problem. So if you cannot deliver the results or the solution to their problems, then your practice is not going to succeed. So, I think last night on one of the webinars of the business ones, a student asked me what's my, number one tip to people starting in this space. And there's a lot of things we could talk about, but I think the number one tip I have is you have to be, proficient in the procedures that you offer, and you have to be very proficient and technically an expert, because if you can't deliver the results that you promised, then your patients aren't going to come back and your practice is not going to succeed, regardless of what a great business person you are. With this particular device, and in particular the cat scratch procedure that we're going to talk about tonight, you're going to see that we have more results with less downtime. So it's not that we don't have other devices that we can accomplish similar results with, but they usually involve significantly more downtime than what we're seeing with this device. And as we talk about the protocol that I use in my practice, you're going to see that it's not just the device, but it's the aftercare and what I combine with the device to get those results. Now, as we talk about plasma, I do want to take just a minute to go over what plasma really is. And We have entire classes on this. And if you happen to, if you're interested in getting a Plexr, or if you take one of our, Empire, our laser classes where we really go over the different wavelengths, we have a whole entire section that we go over plasma. So it's much more than comprehensive than what we can cover on a brief webinar. But in general, we have these states of matter. So you have solid, liquid, gas, and plasma. So plasma is a state of matter. It's basically ionized gas that has charged particles, ions, and electrons. And Plexr is using atmospheric nitrogen to produce plasma. And so if we want to think about something, out there in the universe that's similar, we're going to think about the sun, right? The sun is one giant ball of plasma. And so we're taking from the nitrogen in the air around us in this little handheld device, and we're creating little micro bursts of plasma to treat a particular condition. And so it's not just the, temperature alone. We think about the temperature a lot, but we're also looking at other parameters like density, the electromagnetic properties. All those things kind of are what contribute to this being actual plasma energy, but we know that it's really hot. And so when we think about that, plasma can be as much as 20,000 degrees Celsius. And a lot of lasers that we're using are only maybe up to 300 degrees Celsius, depending on which device you're using. But we know that plasma is significantly hotter. And so if we know that, why does that actually matter? And some people think that's actually even worse. Like if you're putting that much heat, if you can get something that can go that hot, what's gonna be the damage you can cause? And this slide really tells us why that's important. And so we're doing something called sublimation when we're removing tissue. And as we talk about our cat scratch procedure, which is going to be semi-ablative, or meaning partially ablative, we're only removing bits of that tissue. We're not removing entire chunks of it like we would do in a more aggressive treatment, maybe like a non-surgical blepharoplasty. And so what is sublimation? What does it mean? How does this actually do that? And so this is where we're going to basically use plasma with a Plexr device, and we're going to transform this solid tissue immediately into a gas. And so by doing that, it removes that area totally. And so if we look in the middle of this slide, you see a log. And if we applied some heat to that, like a fire, something that got hot, but not, it didn't remove the log totally, it's going to remove eventually moisture from that log. We can remove moisture from tissues. As we're heating that and doing that through other devices that may not get as hot, that tissue will dry out. It will get some thermal damage around it. And so in that process, if you want to compare the tissue to a log, when we're using lasers and other heat devices, many times it's like removing water from that. So it turns the log to charcoal. So it moves us over to that side. So you have something that is lighter than the original substance. There has been some thermal damage around it. Maybe the water's evaporated, but as we're heating that up and the water could be evaporating, that's creating thermal damage around that area. By using plasma energy, we're actually putting so much heat so quickly, we're removing the tissue altogether. So we're not heating up that, we're sublimating it or removing it. So we're turning that log to smoke. So there's no log there, there's no charcoal there afterwards with the plasma energy, because we've removed it totally. We've focused it down into this little tip, or ultra focus it, depending on which tip we're using, and we are removing the tissue totally. So this slide shows us kind of an example of the thermal damage that we may get from using some things like radiofrequency microneedling or laser device compared to the Plexr. And so with that, you'll see that we're creating plasma energy. The energy is staying on the outside of the skin, so there's very little thermal damage. We're putting it directly into the tissue that we want to sublimate or remove, and it's going to remove that tissue without creating a lot of unwanted damage around that. We know when we're using other devices, and I'm not really, saying anything negative about those devices. I use them in my practice. I have RF microneedling and some other lasers. But I find that more and more we're switching some of these therapies, and we're using the Plexr because of the lower downtime with the better results. So you see over here, as this needle is going in and delivering heat, in this example, like radio frequency, we're getting a lot of damage around that, which will cause some necrosis. And, traditionally we thought we had to create a wound, and that wound it had to be inflammatory, and we needed that inflammatory process to really get these great results. And patients thought, I need a lot of downtime. The more painful it is, the more downtime I have, the better that this procedure is going to be, the more money, that I'm going to get out of my money's worth. And we know now that that's not necessarily true. And there's a lot of research going into how we can, regenerate tissue, how we're moving into bioregenerative therapies, how we're stimulating fibroblasts, or how we're selectively removing small amounts of tissue and stimulating those fibroblasts to generate collagen and elastin without creating these big areas of necrotic tissue and thermal damage that may lead to other pigment problems or prolonged wound healing or infectious problems because it takes so long to get through that healing process. And so we know that there's a big push and there's a lot of research into technology as well as topicals and things that we can apply after this to minimize inflammation. And so we are beginning to understand that we don't need this huge amount of damage in an inflammatory process to get really some outstanding results. So as we do this and we talk about our cat scratch procedures, I often get asked, how long do the results last? And I think that's important for us all to understand and to know as we talk to our patients. And some of you I know on this call have heard me on prior webinars, and you hear me talk often on biostimulant therapies. And this is a form of a biostimulant. We're using an energy-based device to stimulate your body to make its own collagen and elastin. And so remember that a lot of your results are going to be directly dependent on other things that are going to factor into that patient's ability to make collagen and elastin. So if they're a sun worshiper, if they're going through extreme weight loss, if they are a smoker, they have a poor diet, all of those things are going to contribute to that patient not responding as much as someone who doesn't do those things. And the results aren't going to last as long. So for our non-ablative therapies, or our nano-ablative therapies, we're going to know that after a series of 2 to 3 of those, they're going to get results that last maybe up to a year. For our semi-ablative, which is where this treatment falls tonight, the cat scratch therapy, usually with 1 or 2 treatments. Occasionally, we will do a second treatment with this protocol. They're going to get results that last 1 to 2 years. So more in the 2-year range for the younger patients, more in the 1-year range for patients who are in the 60 to 80-year-old range. And then for some of the things that we do with the ablative therapies with the Plexr, which is, something for another webinar, but that's where we're actually removing tissue like, excess eyelid tissue in the upper or lower lids. Those are going to be, essentially permanent. That tissue will become lax, and other things that occur with aging will make that, need to be touched up or repeated at some point. But the tissue you remove is gone. It doesn't, shouldn't grow back. So with that, hopefully you kind of understand a little bit about the actual device, what the device looks like, the different tips, and, different therapies that we can do with it. But tonight we're going to really focus on this fractional CAT resurfacing. I think that's kind of an interesting name for it, but it really is because this procedure kind of mimics a cat scratching on your face. And so, it sounds horrible when patients hear that, but it's also kind of a cool way for them to understand the way that this may look immediately afterwards and as they heal. So this is in the realm of treatments from a Plexr. This is a semi-ablative treatment. And so this is not, we're not fully ablating tissue and removing it in a particular area. And this is not the shower. So this is somewhere in the middle. And so we're going to see this is semi-ablative, relatively quick recovery time with great results. And so you see this is a schematic basically showing what we can do with just 1 session. We'll play that again. This is going to be, wrinkled skin, that we're stimulating this fibroblast. You see the collagen and elastin fibers plumping up there. That process for that to occur is going to take somewhere around 6 weeks. So this is not something that's instant. We're going to show you some slides because you will get good results within a week. And so you'll see the patient heals quick and their skin is going to have a nice glow to it within a short period of time. But the real results from the collagen and elastin production is going to take weeks because we know that we're going to have to let that tissue respond to the energy that we're placing into it. The downtime in general for this is just a couple of days. So the closer we put the actual scratches to each other, the more aggressive the treatment, a little bit longer healing time. In general, we're saying that this is a one-time treatment, Like I said, for older patients, I've found that, they may need a second treatment to get some of the results that's going to last. Um, so when we look at this and we talk about how we're going to deliver this energy, you'll see that there's a few ways that we can scratch across the surface. So we're not literally scratching into the skin with the device, but we're using it in a scratching manner. You'll see that we're lightly are actually trying to hover and make minimal contact with the skin with this. We don't really want to press down into it because we're not going to create plasma then. So we're trying to create plasma, which requires a small gap between the tip of this and the skin, and the firmer we press, the less energy, the less plasma we're going to create. And so, it does take a little bit of practice, and you are going to have to get good with your technical expertise to deliver this properly. We can do this with lines or dots, and you see as we do the cat scratch, we're going to be doing lines, and we can overlap those, make a grid pattern. The more tight the grid is, the more close the lines are to each other. The more downtime, the more aggressive that treatment, the more fibroblasts we're going to stimulate. So you just kind of have to have that discussion up front and make sure that you're on the same page with your patient, and that they understand what the recovery will look like. This is one session, and these are usually somewhere in the $1,500 to $2,000 range. You are going to need to check, if there's other practices in the area providing similar type procedures, and make sure that you're, know where you fall within that, and that you market this, appropriately. You'll see that this is a patient before. You'll see right after, kind of as we go clockwise around this. So right afterwards, they're pretty red. You'll see some areas that was a little bit more aggressive treatment, some of those darker spots. And then you see day one. By day three, it's fairly healed. You just have a few of those areas that was more aggressive that are still healing. And then after 1 week, you notice a nice glow to the skin. And so we don't have the picture here of this patient, 6 weeks later. But if you start doing these procedures, I encourage you to get pictures at 1 month and 3 months, because you're going to really notice the difference with any of your collagen stimulating therapies. Usually by 1 month, they're looking better. That's when they're starting to see the result. But by 3 months with any of the collagen stimulating treatments, including this, is when you're going to really see your maximal results. Actually just, kind of earlier today, I was on a business call with my director of operations, and we're looking at some of the things we're doing in the clinic, and we're pretty bad about our before and afters. And, when I look at all the weak points in our practice, I know that that's an area that we need improvement on. And so part of it's our fault for not being more aggressive at getting the patients to come back in. And sometimes it's a little bit of a problem for them, because we have a lot of patients that travel to us. So it's not that easy for them to come back. And so for our local patients, and some of the things we're talking about, ways that we can incorporate other treatments, into this procedure to get them to come back in and allow us to get some of those photos. And so I really want to share them with you guys. I have some in the slideshow that we'll go over and we'll show. But, I encourage you to get those pictures at 1 and 3 months, because that is when you're going to be able to show the patient, here's where you started, and look at this drastic difference. But also understand that 1 to 2 weeks later, their skin is going to have a nice glow because they've had a great exfoliation. So as you scratch all that comes off, reveals that fresh skin. They do have a beautiful glow, but that is not the tightening and the lifting and that we see at about, starting at 4 weeks, improving all the way up to 12. Now, this is an example of the procedure being performed. So you'll see this is the needle tip that is about the size of a pencil tip. And you'll see that it's being scratched in two directions. And so it went across, and now he's horizontally, now he's going vertical over that area. You'll see that there's very light contact, or really they were trying to get no contact there to deliver that. And where you see the darkest of those marks is, probably where he's actually coming off of the skin a little bit more, which is creating a bit more plasma energy right at that particular point. And so it's a pretty quick treatment. You're moving your hand back and forth pretty quickly. The patient has had topical numbing on before this. And she still has topical numbing on other parts of her face that I'll show you while he's doing this portion. And so you can see the kind of the occlusive dressing of the saran wrap there on the nose. That's to really get the topical to penetrate and work more effectively. This is an example of this procedure on the neck. So it's great. But again, we can do it anywhere on the body, but we're doing the cat resurfacing in my practice primarily on the face, submental region, and the neck. And so that seems to be where it's the most popular. I did this technique on, or actually, I didn't personally do it. Jerry did this technique, my husband, on somebody in the office a couple of weeks ago, and we did a huge area over her abdomen for stretch marks. And I'm really kind of impressed at those results just at 2 weeks. He just texted them to me today, actually. And so I can't wait to see her, 4 to 6 week results. So we are doing it in other parts of the body, but I would say the most common areas that we're doing it is face, submental, and neck. And that price, $700 for a session, is just going to be like submental and neck. That's not including the face. As we start looking at the neck for those deeper lines, that's they're saying 1,200 per session here. Again, this is kind of using some national averages. This is going to be a video of this is actually that's a Plexr shower. But this is going to be me doing a cat scratch technique there. And so you'll see I'm using the ultrafine tip. And so that's one where the energy is focused even more. I'm barely going on with that. I'm using a partially ablative technique combined with it. And so she had a little scarring area that I did ablate with that. And then what you see me applying afterwards, I'll just kind of forward to that point and pause it. Well, I clearly don't know how to pause it, but you'll see that as I'm going, I can use the same tip that I'm doing the semi-ablative, that I can be a little bit more ablative on the scarring area. And, what we teach is how to apply that in a specific pattern outside of that scar to pull it open, to pop it open. And then I'm using the ActoFill product afterwards. So with that said, we have about 15 minutes or so left. That's a QR code you guys can use to connect with me on any of my social media or website, and I'll answer questions after this as well. If you guys want to send any questions over, I'm happy to connect with you and answer questions afterwards.
Thank you so much for that
Yeah.
educational session. Few great questions in here.
Okay.
The first one from K Woo, I think would be super helpful. A few different parts to this if you want to read it out and break it apart, because
Okay.
there's definitely
Sure.
a bunch of elements of it.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for your question. And so we will get, again, through all of these. So I've heard that the treatment is not friendly for treating Asian skin. Is it true? Any adverse effects for treating Asian or dark-skinned people? How to prevent and treat hyper and hypopigmentation? What kind of pre and post-treatment should be given to reduce the pigmentation risk? RF microneedling can help with the redness resulting from the treatment with a question mark. How about other side effects and how to deal with that? Thanks.
So we'll do the
So
rest of the rest of the hour. We're going to be covering these questions. So thank
yeah,
you, K
yeah.
Woo. Yeah.
No, so I saw that long one kind of come up. So I want to make sure that that'll take a little bit of time here. So first of all, it is approved we do use it, and it's approved for all skin types. So we use this not just on Asians, but even on Africans and Fitzpatrick type 6. So we do recommend some adjustments and the protocol. We do adjust the energy level slightly. But it is approved for all skin types, and we do use it in our practice on all skin types. So it's not true that it's not friendly for Asian skin. And actually, some of our best results, and the one that you saw there with the clockwise, that is Arash's wife. And so, I don't exactly know her heritage, Jeffrey. I don't know, but I would say she's like a Fitzpatrick 4.
Yeah.
She's not Caucasian. And so she had beautiful results with it. And so definitely a lot of different types of Asian skin can be treated with this device. Now, where this gets the reputation of not being friendly for Asian or Fitzpatrick 4 through 6, let's just take the culture out of it and just say Fitz 4 through 6, is when we're using other devices that are not really plasma devices. So they're usually some sort of device that's using radio frequency or electrocautery, and it looks very similar. And so if I were not educated on the technology and I was just to look at Instagram or TikTok, and I see a lot of these handheld devices and people are creating these sparks, and I don't understand what's being generated there, it may not look different between plasma and electricity and radio frequency. And so if I don't understand how that energy is being generated and delivered, then I may miss the fact that I'm creating a lot of thermal damage. So when we think back on that slide about sublimation and how we can remove tissue altogether with that without creating a lot of thermal damage around where we're delivering the energy, then it would be easy for me to mistake different devices that look similar, but the results are drastically different. Some of these devices you can buy for, a few hundred to a few $1,000s, but they're incredibly dangerous. And that's the ones that I saw, and I don't want to call it any particular profession, but literally that's the one that I saw non-medical people buying these devices off of Amazon. And literally, some of the patients, the management that we had to do to treat the scarring from it, it was a nightmare. And it took, one patient maybe 9 months before we ever had resolution.
Mm.
But once I realized that it's a totally different device, obviously this is a medical grade device. This is a medical treatment. This is something that we're not going to just create burn superficially in the skin. We're delivering plasma energy deep down to the fibroblast that is creating collagen and elastin. So it is a different price point. And so, that should be your first clue when you're getting something that doesn't require a medical license off of Amazon for a few $100s. It's not the same thing. And that will create some problems. And we definitely have seen problems with darker skin types. So in my practice, to answer, we have not. And so I've treated, people of Mexican heritage, Filipinos, Brazilians, Portuguese. So a variety of darker skin types, and have had no problems. Actually, the patient that I had, the most prolonged healing was a very aggressive treatment that I did, but she was Caucasian, Fitzpatrick too. And we just was very aggressive with the barcode, the lip line treatment around her mouth. And it took her a little bit longer to heal than most, but the actual kind of dark spots went away quickly and she was red. And that lasted maybe around 4 to 5 weeks. So again, not months. We were somewhere around a month before it resolved, but she had a phenomenal result from the treatment, but was a little bit red longer than I would normally anticipate. If we want to look at preventing and treating hyper or hypopigmentation, so the two different things. So first of all, the prevention, I think, is going to be the key. So adequate training. And so I think it's really important, any device that you buy, whether you get this one or something else, I think it's important to know the company, know their culture, and how they value education of their providers. So companies who are just looking to make a quick dollar usually have no support after the sale or minimal support, and are not going to focus on education. I know that the plasma companies I work with, and including Med Results especially, put a lot into education. And one of the projects that Jeffrey and I are even working on is how to provide education to our Plexr providers after they purchase the device. So how do we continually train you in more depth than what we're doing in kind of this, brief informational webinar, but how do we provide you with training? And so I think that's important with any company. And so, ask about that education, and then use those protocols appropriately. So until you get really experienced, don't start venturing from that. So with this device, there's a lot of effort that the company has made, and continues to ensure that their providers are thoroughly educated on the protocols and how to treat patients safely and appropriately. And as long as you follow those protocols, you're going to have very minimal side effects. I never want to tell you zero, but it's pretty close to zero if you follow the protocols as we teach them. If there, by some reason, we're going to get hyperpigmentation, we have to usually think that that's most often going to be a post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation, so PIH. So it is a result of an inflammatory process. So sometimes this may occur if there's been improper care for the procedure afterwards, or something that created inflammation in there. So the last thing we really want to do is go in there and do something that's more inflammatory. And so you have to be really careful. People want to treat it quickly, but by going in there creating more inflammation, you actually may exacerbate the problem. So most commonly, time is going to be on your side. If you have somebody that's a very high risk or you're concerned with it, there are some protocols that you can do beforehand. You can put them on hydroquinone to suppress the melanin production from the melanocytes. You usually put them on for at least 2 weeks and have them off for at least 5 days prior to treatment. And so that's one of the ways. I really, advise not doing it on tan skin. And so we live in Florida, so I want patients to avoid the sun and make sure they're wearing sunscreen, wide brim hats, things like that prior to the treatment. And so if they come in and they just had a weekend at the beach and I can look at them and tell that they're tanned or red, then I don't treat them. I reschedule their treatment. I'm okay with doing like a Plexr shower. And again, we can talk about that in another, setting, but I don't do the cat scratch or a more ablative treatment on suntanned or sunburned skin. So sun avoidance for at least 2 weeks prior to the treatment is going to minimize that. If they're, high risk, so some of your darker skin types, then I think hydroquinone, and I just use a 4%. You can combine that with or without retin-A. That will help penetration of it. Some of that, there's some evidence to show that that will decrease it as well, but they're going to be a little bit more reactive. And some people don't like the side effects of, kind of short-term higher dose retin-A. And so I tend to leave that out of my protocol and go just with hydroquinone 4%. Again, for a 2 week period, stop 5 days before. But in all honesty, I rarely use that. That's somebody who's told me they're scared of it. They've had PIH before or some problem. For me, I'm saying I'm going to use the protocol and the training appropriately. I'm going to have them avoid the sun for 2 weeks, and we don't have these type of problems. What is the pre and post treatment that should be given to reduce the pigmentation risk? I think I just went over that in general. That's going to be hydroquinone and again, sun avoidance. And so I want them really strict out of the sun or using wide brim hats, sunglasses, sunscreen for at least 2 weeks and preferably up to a month afterwards. If they're going on a cruise the next week, that's not the time to get this treatment. RF microneedling helping with the redness. I haven't seen that. If that's, the way that's, kind of worded there, I personally have not seen that at all. And I would think it might make it worse. And so I would caution about doing those too close together. There's not really thermal damage from the Plexr. So theoretically, you could go ahead and do an RF microneedling after this. But if it's red and inflamed, doing that may potentially that make it worse. If they're super red, and I think there's some, maybe some components of, potentially rosacea or something like that, then you could consider things that are going to kind of calm that down. So there's some topicals, depending on what you carry in your office, that may calm that down. We can actually treat rosacea with the Plexr. So usually that will bring that down. And so if this is just immediate inflammation and redness afterwards, I'll just say give it time. Don't do anything else that's irritating to it. If it's prolonged redness, and so the patient that I had kind of got anxious around the third or fourth week, and she didn't want us to really do anything else with that. I used a microsecond pulse ND YAG, and so it was something that we can kind of quickly bring the redness down. But that usually requires a series for long-term results. It's not really necessary. I think if you just wait and give it, another week or two, that usually calms down. But you can use something in my office. I use the Aerolase device is what I used for her. So you can use some other devices. The RF microneedling is not the one that I would personally pick. Other side effects, to me, the main side effect is going to be with our more aggressive ablative treatments. I haven't seen issues with the cat scratch technique that we talked about tonight. If you don't put the lines close enough to each other, if you're not really making those dents, to me, what would not be a bad side effect, but would be kind of a poor result is the patient not getting the results they expect. And usually I find that that's a user error in the way that we've applied the treatment more than the actual technology itself. Now, I say that, and that's my, just kind of my opinion, because when we've had that occur and we repeat the treatment, they usually get a really dramatic result. And so is that because now we've kind of primed those fibroblasts, we've stimulated them in some way, although not really aggressively, and we bring them back now and we do it a second time? And regardless of what we do that second time, it's more stimulation because we've really seen dramatic results when we've done that. So the goal is not to have to do a second treatment. We're telling them one, but to me, more often than not, if you're a little bit conservative with your treatment, you're going to decrease your risk of side effects, which is what it seems like you're kind of concerned with, especially with Asian patients. But then just bring them back and do a second treatment. The really great thing about this, it's a quick treatment. So when we look at your profit per room per hour, per provider per hour, it's something that's pretty quick to perform. And when we look at the disposable cost, the little tips only cost you $20. And so it's something that's really easy to go ahead and do a second treatment. And, you could still maintain a huge ROI, even if you charge the patient 50%. Or if they were unhappy with it and you said, I'm going to just, charge you $200 to repeat it, right? I mean, you cover all of your costs with that and you get a phenomenal result. So you have a lot of wiggle room because your actual, cost of your supplies is really low. And so you can easily repeat it. So thanks again for those questions. I think I got all of that answered. And I knew that was going to take a minute. So hopefully that was helpful. All right. So we have Marie Ann, and can an esthetician perform this or any procedure using the Plexr Plus? So that's also a great question. And that's going to depend on the state that you live in and your individual state laws. So definitely don't take what I'm telling you tonight as legal advice. I always recommend that you check with a lawyer, and the specialty of law that you would look for in your area is going to be healthcare administrative law. So if you're Googling or looking for somebody in your area, look for healthcare administrative law and they can help guide you through it. There are some organizations out there that give you some general guidelines for like a yearly fee, but those are very broad. The Plexr, depending on what tip you use. So the nano ablative or the shower is really not going to create any breaks in the skin. And so many estheticians do this throughout the US and in many states. It would depend again on if you're going to get more aggressive and you're going to start doing some of these more ablative procedures, they're going to fall more into the medical realm. And in those cases, you're likely going to need some sort of medical direction. And so whether that's, you're an esthetician that's duly credentialed as a medical assistant and you're have a physician maybe that you work with that's going to, credential you to do that and sign off on it. So there are some ways, and there definitely are estheticians that are using all forms of Plexr throughout the US, but that setup and that protocol and the way that they're legally structuring their practice may be a little different depending on where you live. Okay. Will you share to us the protocol that you use in your med spa? Sure. So, again, the protocol is pretty straightforward. And so if they're at risk of hyperpigmentation, as we discussed earlier, we'll put them on some product before. Other than that, I advise them no sun for 2 weeks before. We have them on a medical grade skincare line prior to coming in for their treatment. We bring them into practice and they get topical numbing placed on their face and they get that for 30 minutes. We use a compounded BLT, which is benzocaine, lidocaine, tetracaine. It's 20%, 10%, and 10%, and that gets applied for 30 minutes prior to their procedure. At that point, it is removed and their face is cleansed with just a gentle wash. That actually is going to remove all the oils because we want this to be dry. We then cleanse it with hypochlorous acid and before we start the treatment. And then we're going to use the devices you've seen on dry skin. So we don't put anything on that at all. We do the scratching. We try to put those very close to each other for a more aggressive treatment. Again, the further we spread those, boxes apart, the less aggressive the treatment, the quicker the healing. So we scratch over the entire face if we're doing a full face rejuvenation. If we're wanting to tighten a particular area more than others, we can basically make that grid pattern really tight in that area. So if I'm trying to really tighten back in around the jaw area, maybe I'm going to tightly cross hatch that area. But in the general and mid face, if I just want some more of a skin glow, I can loosely cross hatch those so that we can selectively determine how we're going to tighten that area. But the protocol is basically numb, cleanse, dry face application of this. And then the really, really important part is at the end, what you saw me putting on. And that is when we use our products. And so that I do use the Active Feel line of products. The Acto Reverse is what I like to use for this. And so it's a product, it's a hyaluronic acid base that has a CD44 signaling molecule in it. So it's a basically or a signaling it goes in there and signals the CD44 receptors to make collagen and elastin. So we're putting something in after we've done this semi-ablative treatment to signal that. I also send them home with that and with instructions that they're going to apply it again within about 2 hours of that procedure. And we give them a post-care kit, which is going to include, a line of products that addresses their whatever their concerns are. So we have products that we have for texture, for pigment, but also in all of the product lines. And you can incorporate, I think the Actofill immediately afterwards and within 4 hours is really key to getting these results. So I would say that that is a very important step in the protocol. What you do from that point forward, I think is important, but less so about a particular brand. And so we do have a brand of products at Med Results that you can use for really outstanding results. But if you're already carrying, Elastin because you're a big, Galderma account or ZO or one of those other product lines, I think make sure you know your product line. It's a great time for you to incorporate retail into your practice and make sure that they're using some sort of a gentle wash and sunscreen. That's going to be your keys to this. Does it work for old stretch marks? Yes. So it's not, it worked for stretch marks, for stria, for any kind of like textural abnormalities. And I don't know if I can actually pull it up because it was just texting me today. We're going to put it, we're in the process of making like a gallery of our Plexr before and afters. I'm going to see if I have this abdomen that I can show you guys. But basically she had stretch marks was her main concern. And this was the way that we opted to treat it. And so, yes, you can treat old stretch marks very effectively with this. Unfortunately, I don't have her before, but I can show you. This is after doing some ablative and the scratch. Jeffrey, can you tell me, can you guys see that?
Your blur is on. Maybe go behind your camera and then do it. Yeah. We can see it a little. We'll send
Yeah,
it as the part
we'll
of the
send it.
follow-up
We'll
because we're
send it out.
sending
I'll
everyone the
send it.
video. We'll send it up as part of the follow-up.
Yeah, we'll send it and I'll send you that and I'll send you what she looks like today.
Great.
And then, you can kind of see, and we'll try to get her before picture so you can kind of see what we opted to treat with that. And so we do treat all over the body, and that's really red. So what we did was more of an ablative technique in the stretch marks, and then we scratched the scratch technique all over the rest of the abdomen. And that was her initial one. Okay. So burn, we have for burn scars, what's your recommended best technique? And burn scars are really, kind of interesting and challenging. So it's going to depend on how the scar is. So we know that there's some areas that are very tight, and this may tighten it up more. And so we may go around that, and we may actually have to ablate parts of it. So with burn scars, what you'll often get is areas that are really tight, and maybe some areas that are raised or hypertrophic. And so we know that we can use this in a more ablative fashion to kind of flatten some of those areas out. But I can tell you with a lot of burn scars, what I recommend is approaching it slowly. We don't do this as a huge aggressive treatment at once. And so we're going to have to find some way to minimize that. And usually if it's a super tight area, I may improve the appearance of it, but you don't really loosen that skin in that area. Also, I may be asking a lot, Jeffrey, just tell me no. But I think the scarring that we have, the picture of the lady's arm, that was really, I can tell you which one in the
Yeah, we
slideshow.
could. I could include that in the follow-up. It's a
But if we can include that in the
wild
follow-up with the
before and after.
photos
Yeah.
for I don't know if I'm saying your name right, Regad Sharif. So if you want to look into follow-up video when we send that out, we have some pretty impressive scarring photos that we've treated with that. And so
Yeah,
we'll
I'll
include
send
those
her
photos.
or him a direct email with that photo.
Yeah, because it's really pretty impressive what you can treat with it. But you have to be, kind of go slow with that. Usually I start with taking down any areas of raised or hypertrophic areas first with the more ablative form. And then we're going to go around that scar to try to pull it out or try to regenerate it. But if it's super, tight and pulled in one direction, it would not be the modality that I would choose to treat that type of scar. Okay. All right, so Deanna, can this be used on the vulva for sexual wellness, and is it used intravaginally? So yes and yes. Um, we do a lot of sexual wellness in our practice. We've actually trademarked a procedure called Vagi Cadabra, where we have our magic wand for the vagina. But we do a lot of other stuff externally as well. And I personally didn't realize that this is a thing until recently, and we're going to do an upcoming podcast episode on this and some videos on it. But we've done fillers into the labia for years, and so we know that there's, as women age, that some of that deflates, and we've had people who wanted them reinflated, so we've done PRP and filler in that area. But more recently, there's been a trend of younger females who's coming in and they want it flat. They don't want to see it. So in their swimsuits, they want it to be almost, one of the girls told me she wanted to be like Barbie, like a Barbie doll. So just flat in that area. And so we are using different modalities. And so actually, I use another plasma device in my office and the Plexr to treat this. So I can really selectively with the Plexr either ablate excess tissue, or I can put my energy delivered very specifically to pull in a certain direction or a certain vector. So we can use this to tighten up the external labia. And one of the really neat things about it, this is the only type of plasma energy that I have in my office anyway, and there may be something on the market I'm not aware of, but this is the only one that I'm aware of that has an intravaginal tip. So we can use this intravaginally for tightening, also to stimulate in the Skene's gland area for improved moisture. So if you're having a lot of problems with dryness, which happens often with perimenopause, then it can be used intravaginally for that. And so really some kind of cool results with that, and it's safe. And so, you're not going to have a lot of problems. You're not going to have any problems with like burns and that sort of thing. Actually, this is safe enough. We didn't get into it. We don't have time to do all the things, but they use it directly intraocular. So there's a huge ophthalmology practice. So when we talk about areas that are safe, we can actually put this directly on the eyeball. And so you'll see that there's ophthalmologists that use this device all the time. So we can use it in different areas intravaginally, and we can also use it rectally. So treating hemorrhoids or perirectal lesions, it can be used for that area as well. Okay, Roy, what have you observed with regards to how frequently or how often CAT resurfacing should optimally be performed? Again, I prefer to do this one, and hopefully they're going to get results in 1 to 2 years. But depending on their lifestyle and our application and their downtime. So the more aggressive we are, it is a one time, and that they're going to be great for 1 to 2 years depending on their lifestyle. But those that have been less aggressive because they either had less downtime, they were worried about side effects. I was hesitant because of the higher Fitzpatrick. Then those have had to do twice, and then I say 1 to 2 years from that point. So what is the difference between the topical aftercare that you are applying and exosomes? This is from Deanna. So Deanna, that's great. So exosomes are like nanovesicles or signaling basically particles or molecules that go and tell the cells to do something, right? And so in general, when we're applying them topically, we're saying we want you to go make collagen and elastin. And so this is a signaling molecule that's in the hyaluronic acid that we're trying to tell it to do that. But you can use exosomes in addition to that. And actually, I do use it with exosomes. I just did an exosome talk last week, and the device is portable and I like it enough. I don't even think I told Jeffrey about this, but I took this was down in the Destin area, and I took the Plexr with me, and that is the device I used to really, it was an exosome talk, but I did a Plexr treatment for topical delivery of the exosomes. And so you can combine those treatments together. So the exosomes are different. Depending on, there's a lot of different types. There's human derived exosomes, there's plant derived exosomes, and there's synthetic exosomes from labs. And the way that those exosomes are harvested, are manufactured, and what they're put with really will determine the results that you're going to get. And so there's some that are more concentrated that we can really use for areas like hair growth. And so using the cat scratch technique in the scalp for hair growth and using an exosome that's concentrated for the hair and combined with other like copper peptides and things that stimulate hair growth, we have phenomenal results. So you can use this device and increase your topical delivery. And so we, again, tonight for time purposes, we didn't get into it, but we use the shower, which is a nano ablative, and we can increase our topical delivery. We can use our cat scratching, or we can even apply it after our ablative care. Now, the exosomes are going to add significantly to your treatment costs. So they're going to be a lot more pricey than your hyaluronic acid with your CD44 signaling molecule. We have really, kind of great results with that. And we can, the ActoFeel line of products. But for patients who want exosomes, or we kind of want to like step this up a notch, I will combine the two. So I put the exosomes first, and then I put on my ActoFeel product, whether it's Acto Reverse or Acto Firm. And so, getting a lot of exosome questions. And so have you combined Plexr shower with exosomes, and how did it turn out? So yeah, I think that's actually what I just answered. So that's what we did in Destin last week. We do it in our practice, but that's what I did in a lecture last week in Destin. So we did a Plexr shower. There were some estheticians in there that did it, and so they were wanting to learn more about things that they could incorporate. And so the Plexr shower was something that they had, they have interest in. And so we were showing them that and how they can combine it with exosomes to get those results. Okay. Do you find that you're having to use ice on the face after treatment? I know Arash in my training, so the topical cream that they send us is the best one. Have you ever tried a BLT cream, or just the cream he recommends? Is the resurfacing the best to use for scars, or is the resurfacing the best to use for scars, or do you recommend the ablative? What would you use for tattoo removal, the resurfacing or the ablative? Okay, so Don, that's several questions. So let's break it down. I don't know actually what Arash sends for topical, to be perfectly honest. So I use a compounded BLT cream, and that's what we've used in our practice for many years. And so I didn't switch. And so he may recommend something else that he loves that I'm not aware of, but we do use a compounded cream. I usually get mine from either Empower most commonly, but I'll also use Olympian. I've used Anazao. So those are kind of the three main ones that I use. And I use a 20-10-10 concentration of benzocaine, lidocaine, and tetracaine. And like I said, it's what we use for all of the devices that we need topical numbing for in the practice. I've had great results with it, so I haven't switched from that. I don't know what he's recommending, Jeffrey, but we can ask him and see. Is the resurfacing best to use for scars or the ablative? So it really depends on the type of scar. So if this is a depressed scar, if this is something like a really small, maybe C-section scar that you can barely see, I think the resurfacing is less aggressive. It heals faster, and usually you get pretty good results with that. But if it's anything that's hypertrophic, I find that we need the ablative. So if it's raised in any manner, I'm using the ablative to try to bring that down and even it out before I'm going to do anything else. Now, once I get it flat, I think from that point to kind of camouflage with the area around it, a lot of times I'll use the scratching technique. And so that's what we're talking about when we're using, I think in this question, you're talking about resurfacing being similar to cat scratching. And so we can resurface with the ablative technique, or we can, provide some milder resurfacing with a cat scratching. And so I think when we use that term, let's kind of just be clear. Basically, we're doing semi-ablative with our cat scratch technique, or fully ablative with our more direct on the spot. And so I'm using a semi-ablative technique once I get the scar flat. If I need to pull it out, I'm going to use my ablative technique around it. And if you have the device, we can show you some videos on that, on how you apply the energy around it in a vector to pull that scar out. And so it's not directly on it. So it's kind of a combination of both of those. And for tattoo removal, we actually do a fair amount of this. You guys may have seen some videos on the social media of us doing this, and we do use the ablative one. So we had we still have, actually, it's fixed again now, but we have a pico laser that we use for tattoos, and we've done tattoo removal for years. And then there was an issue with it. It's an older device that there was an issue with it. And Arash had said, oh, you can use it for tattoos. And I thought, well, that one's down. Let's try it and see. And we had great results, and we actually can control it better. So we have a permanent makeup artist in the practice, and she's been in business for a long time and has to do a fair amount of corrective work from other providers because she gets referrals. She's been doing this 20 something years and gets a lot of referrals from other work. And a lot of times she'll refer to us first for removal of the eyeliner or the, eyebrow that's the wrong shape before she'll re-tattoo it. And so we've been using this a lot, but when the device was down, I think what's on social media, maybe it's on Jerry's, it's like a huge tattoo on the neck that this guy had his girlfriend's name tattooed down his neck, and then they broke up. And so our other device was down, and so we used the Plexr, and I mean, it was crazy after just 2 treatments what that looked like. Can you perform facials after a few weeks after CAT resurfacing? Yes, actually you can. And I would recommend that you get them back somewhere around 10 days to 2 weeks, because a facial after that is going to really get off any of that kind of residual flaky skin that they may be dealing with and give them a nice glow. Rob, is there an amount of time you spend on each zone? Example, the 3 minutes in the 10 zones. With this, it's not so much, it's not going to be as much. So when we're talking about time in zones, a lot of that is going to be more for our shower technique, our nano-ablative technique. And that's so we create enough of those little channels to get our product to really soak in. So if we don't spend enough time, we're not opening enough of those channels. As we move more into the semi-ablative treatment, it's really a bit more aggressive. It's not as much about the time in the zones as the cross hatching of your lines. And so you'll see that the forehead example that we shown in this video, it was fairly quick. So we're not having to spend a full 3 minutes in each of the zones, but we're having to make sure we put those lines very close together. And so we're not going back and forth over the lines like we do with the shower. We're putting them in place, and then we're moving on to the next area. Kay, thank you for your question, Kay. What would be your recommendation for cat scratching for fits 4 through 6 to prevent hyperpigmentation? Because I have hyperpigmentation with it. And so, again, I don't know who did your treatment or protocols or anything, sun exposure, etc. But in general, I would start with the lower energy with that. And so we would use our lower energy handpiece. I would not use the red handpiece. For that, I would start with our lower energies, and definitely if you've had any kind of sun exposure, if you've had PIH before, maybe even the lowest energy to see how that you respond with that. And I would also not tightly crosshatch the lines. Kimberly Worsing, when you travel with the handpiece, do you check it in your luggage or carry it? And if the answer is hand carry, ever any TSA hassles? So first of all, it's always carry. In the past maybe 5 years, I've checked luggage once ever. And we went to, 2 weeks in Africa, and I checked. So in general, I don't check. I'm afraid they're going to lose it. And you guys know that I travel almost every week somewhere. And so everything is carry on, and never a TSA hassle with this. Um, I got a TSA hassle recently, but it was with chia seeds. I had like a little bag of chia seeds that I eat my yogurt in the morning. But no, I've never had an issue with this. How do you decide between the finer tip and the thicker, more penciled lead side for the cat resurfacing? Is it patient dependent, on an operator comfort level dependent? Um, I think it depends, one, on what you have available. There's been some times early on, I haven't had any problems in 6 months or more now, that we had a little bit of a delay in getting some of the like really fine tips. And so really you can use either one. Personally, I prefer the finer tip. To me, it's more comfortable for me to do it. It delivers more energy through that smaller tip, and I get a lot better result in one treatment than using the other one. So I do prefer the finer tip personally. I can tell you some of this may be user dependent because my husband Jerry does a fair number of these, actually probably more than I do at this point. I don't know, he did maybe 4 today, he was telling me while I was traveling, and he prefers the other tip. So he uses the one that's like a pencil tip, and he gets great results. So I think you can use either. It's a little bit more aggressive when you're using the finer tip. Is your protocol similar to the shower where you're doing 3 minutes? And again, we talked about that. No, it's crossing the lines. Um, Basically how we make those cross hatches. That's more important than the time. And then Don is asking, with the glass lift, the protocol is to send the Actofirm with the client to use over the next 4 hours. Do you send anything home with them after this? Yes, it is the same. So with the glass lift, we are sending them home with the product, and it has they're asking them to reapply it. Same thing with this. And so I'm giving them I give a little dropper that has about a cc or so of the product in there, and I'm asking them to apply that 2 to 4 hours later. Um, You said you always recommend the vitamin C balm with every treatment and have use for recommended time after. Yeah, I think that's fine. Again, whatever your post care is, to me, the main thing is going to be the ActoFeel line of products. So ActoFeel is the big category, and within that category, you have ActoFirm, Acto Reverse. We're going to bring some other products into there soon that I'm going to let Arash announce when he gets that ready. But the Acto Reverse is what I usually not what I usually it is what I use with the cat scratch technique. And so that's what we send them home with. So we put it on at the time of treatment, send them home with that. And then according to whatever you're retailing in your practice is going to be their care that they resume after that. So with us, we do have, I'm a big Galderma account. And so we carry a lot of Elastin products. And so we have them on the Elastin line from that point forward is what I have them recover on. So I use Elastin Nectar, or Elastin Balm, a gentle wash, and a sunscreen. Can it be used to treat warts, including genital warts? Yes, and yes, it can be used for both. Again, be aware that you are sublimating this, so you're turning this from a solid to a gas. And by doing that, there can be some vaporization of HPV particles, and you don't want to inhale that. So I recommend that you wear an appropriate personal protective gear, which includes a mask that's going to be rated for that. So just like you would laser any wart and use a mask for that, that smoke, that plume that's coming off of this as you vaporize it, you don't really want to inhale that. And you would want to use your smoke evacuator as well. Are you hovering over the face or trying to avoid contact with this is from Vera. Are you hovering over the face, trying to avoid contact with the skin or making contact with this cat scratch? It's a very light touch. So ideally, we would barely be hovering above the skin to create the plasma energy, because if we're making contact, we're not really creating plasma energy. And the firmer that we're touching on that, we're really not going to create anything at all. So if you guys have used the Plexr, if you stop by at any of our live events and try it out, you'll notice when we touch and make contact, it doesn't hurt at all. And so really what we're trying to do is lightly scratch over that area, and that little bit of scratching, that those gaps that we're having as we're lightly touching it, is creating a lower amount. I don't know if that's technically right, not necessarily a lower amount, but basically we're trying to create a small gap to create plasma energy to stimulate the fibroblasts. If we touch it and press too firmly, we're not going to create that gap, and we're not going to create plasma.
Thank
Okay.
you very much, Dr. Crowley. Really appreciate your time and
Yes.
your knowledge. Any final words before we hand it back over? I know there was some more information from Empire we wanted to cover.
So I think Fallon's going to cover that. I just want to say thank you for being here with me tonight, Jeffrey. Thank you, Med Results, for asking me to do this. I love the device and the technology, and we'll talk about it any chance that I get. Any of you guys that are on the call, feel free, to reach out to me. Again, the easiest is through my social media channels. Instagram is just DrCroley, Dr. Crowley, and from there you can get links to all my other stuff. Jeffrey knows how to get in touch with me. And I look forward to being with you guys again soon.